I will call this meeting of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Military and Veterans Affairs and State Police to order. Welcome, everyone. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Chair Morgan.
Here.
Representatives Wilson. Braybeck. Morse.
Here.
Cabot.
Here.
Green.
Present.
Slaw.
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Great. Rep. Morse moves to excuse absent members without any objections. All members are excused. And we will, do we need to approve minutes? Yes. Rep. Slaw moves to approve the minutes from the prior meeting without any objections. The minutes are approved. Great. Thank you so much for being here. We look forward to hearing from you today regarding the Office of Highway Safety Planning. We have, Emily Shinovar. Emily Shinovar, Manager of Planning and Administration Section, and Zeta Schreiner, Manager of the Financial Management Section of the Office of Highway Safety Planning, and First Lieutenant Nicole McGee, Commander of the Government Relations Section of the Department of State Police, to give a presentation on the work of the Office of Highway Safety Planning. Thank you so much, and we will jump right into your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the introduction. I'm going to turn it right over to Emily. As always, we'll be available for questions before, during, and after committee.
Wonderful. Thank you. So to start off talking about the Office of Highway Safety Planning, apologies. I'm going to go back a little bit. Both Zeta and I are here today on behalf of the director of the OHSP, Office of Highway Safety Planning. Director Katie Bauer apologizes she could not be here, but she's the chair of the Governor's Traffic Safety Advisory Commission, and they have a meeting at exactly this time. So her schedule didn't work out, but she sends her apologies. Okay, we're going to start off by talking about the Highway Safety Act of 1966. This is federal regulation that allowed the creation of state highway safety offices across the country. So that is how our office came into creation. A little bit of history. With this act, we were first created in the governor's office. So that's where we started in 1966. We administered 402 funding, which is a type of federal funding. In 1969, our office was then moved to the Michigan Department of State Police by executive order. So this was a state reorganization. We have lived within the Office of the State Police or Department of the State Police since that time. The OHSP mission statement: we are here to save lives and reduce injuries on Michigan roadways. We partner with public and private organizations. We're always looking for innovative ways to improve traffic safety in our state. Our office, we have several sections within our office. As you heard, I'm part of the Planning and Administration section. I manage that. Zeta's with our Financial Management section. Our director, Katie Bauer, is with the Executive section. And when we're fully staffed, we have 26 staff members. Here's an organizational chart as another visual for you with the staff in our office. As you can see, we do have one vacancy right now, so we are at 25 staff. Federal regulations dictate what we have to do as a state highway safety office. We have to submit a triennial highway safety plan. That's every 3 years. We also have to submit an annual grant application. So these are new regulations based upon the bipartisan infrastructure law that came into effect for us in fiscal year 24, so just starting in October. Prior to that, we had to do an annual highway safety plan. So this switches it up a little bit for us, having to report on 2 plans. We also have to submit an annual report at the end of each year, detailing all the funds that we expended, all the grant projects we worked on, the progress on our highway safety countermeasures and our targets. It's a very detailed report. We also have to award grants to recipients, to other state agencies, to local entities, based on our annual grant application, or AGA, in all program areas. We average about $20 million from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration every year. This amount of money covers all of our grants, administrative costs to run our office, and paid media. And I will discuss all of our program areas in an upcoming slide. The responsibilities of OHSP, again, we have to carry out everything that we said we were going to do in the Triennial Highway Safety Plan and the annual grant application. This includes another requirement to hold public participation and engagement. That's what PPE stands for. This is another bipartisan infrastructure law requirement where we have to go out into local communities and get their direct input on all of our highway safety programs. They have to have input on our triennial HSP, on our annual grant application, and can also be awarded grants themselves. We also are required to support national law enforcement mobilizations on restraint use and impaired driving campaigns. Right now, there are 3 campaigns total, 2 on drive sober or get pulled over. Again, these are national campaigns, and 1 on click it or ticket, or seatbelt and restraint use. Federal regulation also requires that we conduct a seatbelt use survey every year to determine what our seatbelt use rate is. We also have to improve our data system, so we need to integrate data. We need to make it more timely, more accurate. So this helps us determine where the greatest need is to address traffic safety issues. We also have to comply with a minimum of 40% of our 402 funds that we receive from the federal government. They have to go to local programs. That means we can't fund them ourselves. We can't give them to other state agencies. It has to be local to the communities. We also work with the safe system approach. So this is a U.S. Department of Transportation approach where we look at traffic safety holistically. One thing that stands out to me is that death and serious injury is unacceptable, right? So this is part of what drives our office and our mission statement. We collaborate with multiple partners to make this approach possible. Here are some crash statistics in Michigan. We always look at least a minimum 5-year range so that we can get trends, so that we're not looking at just one-off years. This is especially evident with the recent pandemic, right? We didn't want to look at 1 year specifically. So with the 2023 final crash data not yet available, that's typically finalized in the spring or summer every year. Here's a look at our 2018 to 2022 crash stats. So as you can see, last year in 2022, the total fatalities were over 1,000 just in Michigan alone on our roadways. So that is terrible. We live with that all the time. We want to make sure that number is reduced. I have some statistics as well regarding when traffic crashes are reported. 1 traffic crash reported about every minute, 48 seconds. A death occurred every 7 hours. A person injured every 7 minutes. This is what we're working to improve upon. I also wanted to make a note in the table here. You'll see total persons A and B injured. This is the scale that we use on our traffic crash reports. So A means that a suspected serious injury occurred in a crash, and B means that a suspected minor injury occurred. So that's all injuries in that table column. Going back to federal projects, as I mentioned, the U.S. Department of Transportation is our overarching entity that we receive federal funding from. They work through the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA. They then grant federal funds to our office, a state highway safety office, and then we can grant those funds to local grantees in our state. One very important fact is that these traffic safety projects are all about changing attitudes and behaviors. It's not about infrastructure, right? That's the MDOT side of things. They fix the roadways, they do that, but we are all about working with drivers and other roadway users to change their attitudes about how they approach roadways and safety. This is a list of several types of entities that we typically get grant applications from. I won't go through them all here, but it is a wide variety of agencies. We're really excited to continue to collaborate with a bunch of different types of agencies. And now I'll talk about our highway safety programs. So this is how we organize our annual grant application in these areas. As you can see, driver education, we focus on teen and older drivers, impaired driving, motorcyclist safety, occupant protection. We just have a wide variety of programs that we work with these federal highway safety funds. And then I wanted to highlight some of the specific projects that we're working on. One is the traffic safety networks. So this is a regional approach. We have split up the state into regions, traffic safety networks, and we work with AAA of Michigan to conduct at least quarterly meetings so that we can have conversations with people across the state within their local communities to discuss all traffic safety topics. Like, what are they seeing? Where's the most need in their community? We support that and really encourage people to join those meetings. Anyone from the public is welcome. We try to pull in stakeholders from a variety of professions as well. That's something we're really proud of. Another thing is the Michigan Traffic Safety Summit. That's an annual conference that our office conducts every year. We actually just held it last week at the Kellogg Center. We had over 500 attendees, over 60 presenters, 2 full days of general sessions, workshop sessions. It's just an amazing opportunity for people across the state and even across the country to come and collaborate on traffic safety. A few other things that we fund are the Shadow Rider Project. This has to do with motorcyclist riders. So this is a project we're also really proud of. We started back in 2013. We worked with the Michigan Department of State and driver data to determine the motorcyclists on our roadways that are out there riding, have registered motorcycles, but do not have a cycle endorsement on their license, which is required to ride a motorcycle in Michigan. So back in 2013, we identified about 50,000 riders who were out there unendorsed. And we have worked with public education, paid media, all of that, to get the message out there about getting trained and staying safe on our roads. So as of last year, we were down to about 23,000 unendorsed. So we've cut it down in half over 10 years. So we're pretty proud of that, right? With behavioral change, it takes some time. So that's a pretty exciting success story for us. Some other programs that we work on are community car seat distribution. This is where we work with car seat technicians across the state, particularly in areas where there's low-income families, where they may not be able to afford a very expensive car seat, which I know as a mom of a 3-year-old. So we work with them to distribute car seats to make sure that the car seats are installed properly so that their children can stay safe on the road. Another thing that we're really proud of is our distracted driving paid media, especially since the law changed to hands-free driving last June. We've worked with multiple partners, including MDOT, to conduct paid media and educate Michigan citizens about this law change. We've also developed videos for Move Over law, which requires that people, when there is a emergency responder on the side of the road, to move over or slow down. So we've provided education on that and construction zones. We also offer a lot of law enforcement training with these funds. The piece I have here is regards to law enforcement training on pedestrian and bicyclist safety laws. So we work closely with the League of Michigan Bicyclists and MSP Enlisted to educate law enforcement across the state on what our state pedestrian and bicyclist safety laws are, so that they know what to do and how to handle that when they're out on the roads. Another highlight is the Michigan Traffic Crash Facts website. I included that link in here. This is a public site that allows anyone, it's a public site on the World Wide Web, anyone can access it and look at Michigan's crash data. You can look at a analysis report, many analysis reports. You can look at publications that we've worked with the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute to develop. And there's also a query tool. So if you're interested specifically in a small community in the state, or if you want to specifically look at teen driving data, you can narrow that down and look at a lot of details on this site. It's a really, really good site. Let's see here. Another thing I mentioned earlier, Director Bauer, is at the Governor's Traffic Safety Advisory Commission. That's the GTSAC here. Within that commission, there are also action teams. So that means that across the state, we have different groups of partners who come together based on a traffic safety topic. So there's an impaired driving action team, there's a non-motorized pedestrian and bicyclist safety action team, and those teams, they create action plans. And then every year they report on their accomplishments. So it's just another way to collaborate and get people to work together to solve, this traffic safety issue that we have. I also wanted to highlight some of our police traffic services grants. This means that these are grants that we issue to law enforcement agencies. It's on an overtime basis only. We do not fund with federal funds regular time, only overtime. I mentioned earlier about those required mobilizations they have to participate in. We also have a regional collaboration on speed enforcement. So we work with other states in our region as assigned by NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And in July of every year, we call this Great Lakes High Stakes. We have a focus on speed enforcement. Some other types of enforcement that we have are school bus safety enforcement. That's really important to us, and distracted driving campaigns as well. One highlight is that for the first time in FY24, fiscal year 24, we were able to grant an enforcement grant to a tribe in our state, so that was pretty cool. Another requirement with the bipartisan infrastructure law is that all law enforcement projects have to have community collaboration and data transparency. So that's something that all of our enforcement grants have to report on to us, and we have to report on to NHTSA in our annual report every year. As a highlight here, all of our enforcement grants come out to about $5.75 million awarded in FY24, so we're about halfway through the year right now. This includes projects to Michigan State Police, to local county sheriff's offices, and local municipalities across the state. Here is a list of the funding sources that our office typically receives from NHTSA. This is not a comprehensive list of every single funding type that NHTSA administers, but this is the funding sources that we as the state of Michigan qualify for. As you can see, there are some specific funds to specific programs like motorcyclist safety, impaired, but then you'll see Section 402, as was highlighted with that 1966 regulation. That's the general overarching traffic safety fund that we receive from NHTSA. And I've put a average of how much we typically are awarded from NHTSA every year by funding source. The 402 funds are by far our greatest at around $11 million. We also get a lot in the impaired driving area. So again, we are on track to expend nearly $20 million in federal funds every year. NHTSA also estimates an increase in funding for next year and continuing years. Some funding challenges that our office works with is that our office, OHSP, we cannot request an amount of funds from NHTSA. So they have in regulation what the requirements for eligibility are per each funding type, but we can't say we'd like to use about $5 million of that this year. They issue that to us by formulas and other states' eligibility. So that's something that we struggle with, right? If we have projects for $5 million and they award us $10 million, it's a little tricky sometimes. And they do expect liquidation. So when they award us funding each year, we have 5 years to expend those funds. And if we don't, we have to give it back to the federal government. Another thing we work with is that a minimum of 50% state funds is required for all of our administrative costs. Every salary in our office, supplies, operating, everything it takes to do our work, only 50% of that can be federally funded. We have to match that with 50%. Appropriation and authorization, those are vital to how we can spend our federal funds. We are a highlight on our 2024 federal grants. They started October 1st of last year, and they're going to go through September 30th. We can only award grants on an annual basis because that's how we're awarded the funds from NHTSA. This year we had 124 approved grants. 53 of those were enforcement grants, and 71 were non-enforcement grants, which means they had to deal with public education, community engagement, maybe paid media, that type of thing. We we work with 70 agencies, more than that with multi-agency enforcement. Sometimes you'll get an agency like Macomb County Sheriff's Office, and they will work with local municipalities in their area to complete the enforcement for the grant. So we're really excited to see that collaboration and partnership when possible. This year, we also took a regional approach for more inclusion and diversity as we solicited grant projects. We really needed to reach out to underserved communities. Not only is this a requirement by NHTSA, but this is something really important to us as well. We always want to have new partners and have more innovation and allow traffic enforcement initiatives to be more flexible. I did want to touch on our partnership with MDOT as well. As I mentioned earlier, the U.S. Department of Transportation is that overarching governing body. However, while NHTSA issues us federal funds and they're the behavioral side of traffic safety, MDOT is governed by the Federal Highway Administration, or FHWA. So we have two different governing bodies under the U.S. DOT. We have to coordinate our triennial HSP and annual grant application with the statewide strategic highway safety plan, and MDOT is in charge of making sure the strategic highway safety plan is in place for our state. We also are required to share 3 traffic safety targets or measures within our triennial highway safety plan and then MDOT's plan, which is the Highway Safety Improvement Plan. So those 3 shared targets include our target to reduce traffic fatalities, to reduce serious injuries, and reduce fatalities by 100 million vehicle miles traveled by that rate. We also collaborate with MDOT on the safe system approach that I talked about earlier. And sometimes we award grant projects to MDOT when they need help on the behavioral side of traffic safety. If they're working on an infrastructure project like roundabouts and they need help to educate people about how to use a roundabout, that's where we can come in and work with them. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Zeta.
Good morning. I will be speaking on secondary road patrol and the truck safety funds. The secondary road patrol and accident prevention fund was created as a state grant program under the Public Act 416 in 1978 to provide county sheriff's offices with funding for patrolling county and local roads outside the limits of cities and villages. It was transferred to OHSP in 1989, and the services that are provided by the Secondary Road Patrol Act, counties can use the funds provided to patrol and monitor county roads for traffic violations, enforcing criminal laws, providing emergency assistance on or near a highway, and the other traffic safety and information. SRP funding comes from the Liquor Control Tax Fund. We receive $15 million annually, and it is distributed to the counties based upon a formula which is complex, and it's calculated using the county road funding formula based on population and miles of highway. The Michigan Truck Safety Fund is a unique program. It's one of a kind in the country. And this Public Act of 348 of 1988 created the Michigan Truck Safety Commission. This is housed in the Office of Highway Safety, and its role is to educate drivers on truck safety, and that was it. I said all. The Michigan Truck Safety Commission's mission is to enhance truck and driver safety through education, increasing driver awareness of trucks and their limitations and characteristics on the roads, and to support enforcement of safety motor carrier laws. The Michigan Truck Safety Commission activities in FY24, there are 3. The commission awarded grants to the Center for Truck Safety to provide education and training to truck drivers and the motoring public through classes and seminars. The Michigan Center of Decision Driving was awarded a grant, and with that funding, they purchased a trailer and simulator for educational outreach and training of truck drivers, and this is also used in exhibits around the state for the public to get awareness of various ways the trucks work on the road from a motorist perspective. And $2 million is provided to the Michigan State Police Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division, we call it CVED, to enforce the truck safety laws on trucks in our state roads. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the presentation. We're happy to answer any questions the committee has.
Great, thank you so much. I think we have a few. Rep. Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I sort of have 2 lines of questioning, if that's okay.
Yeah, feel free.
In our grant processes, we see several different types of grants, so on and so forth. Can you talk about how we go through the process of choosing which grants to apply for? And then I guess in that same line of thinking, is it that we're looking out there saying these grants are available, let's go get them, and then we come back and change our policy based upon the grants we got? Or is it that here's what we want to do when we go get the grants? Which horse is driving the cart?
Yeah, it's the latter, right? So we put out a open solicitation process. This year it opened February 1st and closed March 15th. So anyone in the state of Michigan could go on our website and put in what we call a project proposal for a grant. And based off of what we review and determine the need, the desire, the ability to spend funds is at, that's how we determine what we apply for in the federal government funds.
And then on the legislative side, it's just sort of, we got this grant, appropriate it. So it's, because we appropriate the finances, so you've already gotten the money, then you say, legislator, we have the money, we want to do this. And our hands are sort of tied in that respect.
They're not tied, but they come in those authorization to spend lines.
Okay. So second question, is there a grant out there to help us reduce speed in our new high occupancy vehicle lane, or maybe I should call it the NASCAR lane in Oakland County? Because I've been on that road. I'm telling you, it's nuts. I'm running higher than the speed limit and I'm being passed like I'm sitting still.
So for speed, we can grant awards to enforce speed limits. Unfortunately, there's formulas and data behind what the speed limits are set that our office has no control over. So when we put or award grants, it's for enforcement of the current speed limits.
Any other questions, Rep. Green? I'm good. Okay. Rep. Morris? And then
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation this morning. I wanted to go back to the page on crash statistics. I am wondering, is there a breakout of what percentage of the fatalities, for example, are considered due to impaired driving, distracted driving, speed? Is there more detail somewhere?
Yes, we have a lot more detail. We can go as detailed as you'd like. I can follow up.
Yeah, if you could follow up, that would be great, because I think for us and an understanding of, investing in things, and where do the investments make the most sense? Why are the accidents happening? What is the most likely reason? And we did put through distracted driving a couple years ago, so it'd be interesting to have those stats. Thank you.
Could you share that with the whole committee if you are able to share that?
Absolutely, sir.
Great, thank you. Rep. Slaw?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So let's see, on slide 7, it said that you have an annual report. And
Correct.
would that include all the details that Rep. Morris was just asking about?
That's a great question. As far as traffic crash statistics, we do offer some data on that in our annual report, but something like the Michigan Traffic Crash Facts is where we would download that or work with our Criminal Justice Information Center to get you those breakdowns.
So what does the annual report really entail?
It entails a complete list of all of the grant projects that we awarded, what the amounts that were funded to each project, each agency, what the goals of each project were, and what the accomplishments and results of each project were.
Okay, so not really statistical data about speeding or traffic or any of that's all in other reports, not in the annual report.
Correct.
Got it, okay. Do you want me to keep going?
Sure.
Chair? Because I've got a few other questions if you allow.
Yeah, feel free.
All right. So on slide 8, you had the minimum 40% of the 402 funds must go to local programs. So, and you gave us some of the things, but what does it take to qualify? I mean, what organizations could actually submit a request, and what would it take to qualify for program dollars?
Yeah, as far as a local program qualification, it would mean anything not a local state government, not a educational institution that's really large, something on the smaller level, like a city police department would be one of those qualifications. A nonprofit agency like the League of Michigan Bicyclists would qualify for that. County sheriff's offices, the city of Detroit that we have a pedestrian safety campaign with would qualify. Those are just some examples.
So as an example, could Michigan State University apply and related to something about their either walkability or other kinds of things related to their campus?
Yes, they can apply. We actually have a grant with MSU for the seatbelt use survey. However, in this specific instance of a minimum 40% going to a local program, they would not qualify for a local program because they would be a major university.
For the moment, I'm good. I'll look for some more.
Okay, I have a, do you have? No, go ahead. Okay, I have a couple, kind of following up on the crash statistics. I'm curious, looking through this and seeing, obviously there was a reduction during 2020 when less people were driving, but the numbers have been going up. The crashes have been going up, but the fatalities seem like they're kind of, looking at 2020, the fatalities seem like they've just gradually been increasing every single year. Can you tell us more about that? Is there a reason that the fatalities have just been consistently going up, even in that year when there was a dip in crashes?
I can speak to that a little bit, yes. I think that what we've seen with the pandemic is that while there were less people on the roadways, and you can see in that row there that the injured people in crashes had gone down in 2020, but the fatalities had gone up, we're seeing more severity since the pandemic in a crash, in the crash injury. So that's why part of the reason for that increase in 2020, we typically, and there has been research on this, and I can direct you to that as well. But that's just one thing, right? That even though there's less people on the roadway, it's a higher severity, more reckless behaviors, if you will, for the smaller amount of people on the roadways that year.
Gotcha, okay. Another question, so it seems like the department here at the state is responsible for kind of tracking this information and some sharing grants with different communities. But does anyone in state government have sort of a an oversight or a responsibility for seeking to like setting goals for reducing crash statistics or improving traffic safety? Is there sort of an entity that is responsible for trying to reduce the number of crashes?
I would say that's something we work to do. In our triennial HSP and our annual grant application, we set targets. Like I mentioned, we have 3 shared targets, even with MDOT, on reducing fatalities and injuries. So that's something that we are working to do. I would say it's a shared responsibility between us and MDOT and other traffic safety partners.
Okay. And then one other question here is, what have you seen as kind of the most effective tool to reducing crashes? Is it sort of the media and PR type efforts of public information, public education, or is it enforcement type grants? Do you have any insight as to what you've seen as being more effective?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something we look at every year. It's always a mixture of things, right? You can't have enforcement without education. A lot of times we'll have an educational piece first before we'll even fund an enforcement effort in an area. And other, like that safe system approach slide, right? We try to create and touch every piece of that. So not only on the behavioral side, people who are driving or walking or rolling, but what do the roads look like and how do we navigate them? It's a full picture. It's a lot of things. And technology in vehicles is a huge asset. So a big collaboration of things.
Great, thank you. Are there other questions? Epslaw?
Sure, I've got questions. I'm on slide 19. One of the comments on here is that there is a focus to reach underserved communities. What's underserved? Is that lack of traffic enforcement? Is that lack of, I guess, help me understand what underserved means in this particular case.
Yeah, it's a variety of things. We look at socioeconomic status. Sometimes we look at maybe there isn't law enforcement in that area. It could be a variety of things.
Okay. And then just a question related to setting speed limits on roadways. And I have a specific project in mind. We've had conversations with the department related to the Jenison area. If I look at the mission statement, it's to save lives, reduce injuries on the Michigan roadways. And setting a speed in a subdivision of 55, which is the default based on, it might be 45 if you count driveways or whatever, but it seems like when we look to set up a speed limit like that, a default speed limit like that, that's a problem, and yet it's what the department did just recently. So how do I justify the mission statement when we're actually increasing what would appear to be increasing the speed limit inside of a community?
So I think the issue with the speed limit that you and I have been talking about, Representative, is that that's a statutory issue that falls back to, not an OHSP program area, if that makes sense.
No.
That the Traffic Crash Reconstruction Unit relies on the statutes and how they set their speed limits. OHSP doesn't set the speed limits, they grant funding to enforce the speed limits.
Okay. So who in the department, or where is because you guys are involved in setting the speed limits for that on those roadways. When we identify that the speed limit that was there, we were told we need to put in 40 Ns, that would tell me that you've set the speed limit.
That would be something we'd have to look at legislatively.
Because you did or you can't do it, or I'm not understanding why it's a legislative issue.
Because the Traffic Crash Reconstruction Unit sets the speed limits based on statute.
Lieutenant, are you saying there's a set formula or way of going about it that we set legislatively? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yep, and we're happy to have those discussions further as well, as always.
I understand.
Appreciate that. Very kind answer. Nicely pointing out that it is us who could make that decision. Rep. Morris?
Thanks, Chair. I believe that statute has come up for discussion. The statute prescribes how it is done, I think is what you're saying, right? This prescribes how we determine speed limits. It tells you how the process for doing that.
Correct.
Yeah. So my question is also about speed limits. As much as I enjoy the 70-mile-an-hour speed limit, and in some cases 75, depending where you are in the state, cars are supposedly, safer than ever, surrounded by airbags. So the fact that the fatalities keep going up, has there been any sort of study about the higher speed limits and the impact on fatal and, serious injury crashes? Is there any data out there that's being collected that would inform us on if that's the right thing to do, to keep doing?
Yeah, there is a study out there by, I believe, Michigan State University has a recent study. We can follow up with that, right? Yeah.
We can try to pull that. It should be public.
Great. Are there any other questions? Let's see. Let me make sure I have everything. I guess one last question here, which is just looking at the different grant programs that you administer, have you found that any particular grant program seems to be more successful or helpful than others?
That's a great question.
If not, that's okay. I don't want to put you on the spot. I was just generally curious.
I can't point out any one particular thing. I don't know if you can. I did try to highlight, some successes, like I mentioned, the Shadow Rider project. But it's so collaborative. It's so, it's all intertwined, right? When you look at impaired driving, there's so many aspects to that. So it's hard to pinpoint one thing.
Okay, great. And I think the last thing I would say is just, I think we would probably all be interested in hearing kind of seeing more studies that you might be able to share with us on crash statistics and how we might be able to reduce crashes. It does seem that vehicles are safer than ever, and we are still seeing increased crashes and deaths, which doesn't really make a lot of sense. I suspect there are some key reasons to that, but so I think we'd all be very curious just to learn more about that area. Any final comments from you all?
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for coming in. We wanted you to come in today because this is an area that I think is very important. Rep. Slaw requested hearing more about it, and I agreed that this is an area that we should all be paying attention to, and perhaps doesn't always get highlighted for the very important work that you all are doing to keep us safe on the roadways. So thank you so much for coming in today. And let's see, without any further business for the committee, we are adjourned.